tracks. The other side of the tracks. The other side of the tracks.
Here in Germany, record executives are excited at the success of several German artists in the American charts. Peter Schilling has gone into the top 20 with his Major Tom, a former German #1. Nina has made the top 100 with 99 Luftballons. And Falco has sold over 200,000 copies of his German-language original of Der Kommissar. But at home in Deutschland, there's a problem. A reduced share of chart records by German artists, and that means less profit for the local record companies. Blame it in part on those pesky British groups who insist on selling records abroad. For example, Depeche Mode from Basildon have done over 200,000 copies of Construction Time Again. And here, in beautiful, sunny downtown Hamburg, they've sold out 3 nights at the Hamburg Music Hall. There was a lot of publicity, actually, when Dreaming of Me first entered the charts in a moderate position, that this is a young group on an independent label. Well, of course, you couldn't help being young or independent. But did you feel any pressure just because you were a young group?
Not really, no. I think it's more to your advantage, you know, being that younger. I think it's since the sort of the punk explosion that's become easier to do for young people to start bands. You know, you felt that you don't have to learn how to play an instrument for 10 years before you can get into the music business. So I think it's a good thing.
Well, you signed with Daniel Miller on Mute Records. We're told that at the time nobody else was making any offers, but after you had a chart record, obviously you must have had some kind of offers. What made you decide to stick with him?
Well, it was actually during when we was playing concerts, for instance, at the Bridge House, and various major labels were offering us sort of money and things, and all different advances for clothes and things like that. But it was not really interesting. So we were working and we were doing it mainly for fun at that time. And we just wanted to make a record sort of thing. And Daniel came along and offered us that.
So what made you decide that Depeche were right for you?
Well, I saw them. They were supporting Fat Gadget at a concert in a place called the Bridge House. And they were just great, that's all. You know, really good songs, just the right approach to what the music. I mean, I could just tell within a few minutes that it was the right thing.
And of course, in a sense, they were slightly ahead, perhaps a year ahead, in their development with synthesizers. Was that something that you saw coming around the corner?
Yeah, I mean, I'd visualized, well, I'd imagined that there would be a group, or lots of groups, really, like of that age coming up with this, sort of growing up more with a synthesizer rather than going to it because it was fashionable. And they were just one of a lot of groups around at that time, or a few groups around at that time, but they just had something special. The songs and just the approach, the arrangements and things like that were just great.
Would you say that you actually got good guidance from Daniel Miller, or did he just kind of leave you alone?
No, I think we were very, very lucky to find Daniel, or for Daniel to find us, because at that time we were very naive in the know, if you like, you know, about the music business, and we didn't really understand any of it. And when people sort of are offering you huge amounts of money, you don't really understand why. And Daniel sort of come along and he didn't have any money, but he said he could make a record and he could do as well with it as any major label, and we thought it was the most honest thing we had heard, and so we decided to do it with him.
Every record was a success. New Life made the top 20 and had a very interesting sleeve on the single. And all of your records in that time, 1981, had very interesting sleeves on them. Who was doing them for you?
All sorts of people.
Mainly friends, the early sleeves. You know, we used to just tell all our friends that we had a record coming out and ask them come up with all designs and that, and so that's how they came to be.
There was like friends of Vince and Martin and General, and I had friends at college who were doing things, and we just sort of got our bits together at the end and we'd decide which one we liked the best and use it. It was good. It's interesting doing that sort of thing.
And of course you had the, was it a chicken on the front of the spell?
A swan. It could have been a chicken. It was in a plastic bag.
It was supposed to be a flying swan, but I don't think they could find a flying swan, because we just ended up with a stuffed swan, you know, in a plastic bag.
Don't ask us why.
Well, you had Just Can't Get Enough in the top 10. That was your first big top 10 record.
Yeah.
And it really established you as a synthesizer group, of course. This is no surprise, since that's what you were all playing. But was it a tag that you thought was something you'd have to live down or get away from at all?
No, we've never liked to have a tag. You know, we'd never like to be, you know, given like we've been called new romantics, futurists, and everything. We've always tried to get away from any sort of tag, but we can't deny that we use synthesizers. You know.
At least that's an honest tag.
Of course, Vince left the group, and in one of those moments of show business pressure, the old focus goes on Martin here to try and write the songs instead of Vince. I mean, you'd done a couple before, but did you feel a lot of pressure? Did you think you were up to the job?
Well, we expected that Vince was going to leave about 6 months before he actually did. So we'd already sort of got down to some writing, and so when he finally told us, it didn't come as a shock. You know, we just went into a studio and come up with the next single.
Just when Depeche became a top 10 group, of course, Vince Clarke left them. Now, they say that they weren't panicked. Were you?
No, not really. It was such a gradual kind of departure, well, from the way I could see it, from the way the band could see it, I think, as well. That everybody was sort of gearing themselves up to it, and everybody knew that Martin could write good songs and had written good songs. And there was no point in panicking, really.
And of course, at the time, he wasn't the mythic Vince Clarke. He was just one of you guys who was leaving the group.
It was also very early in our you know, it was very early on, so it was good in a way that it happened at that time, because nothing had really, it'd only been one album. And since then, of course, we've had the two albums that have been very successful for us. And so I think we've established ourselves since then. And a lot of people don't even associate Vince with Depeche Mode anymore. You know, especially in places like Germany, you know, they ask if you know Vince, you know, have you ever met him? And we say, yeah, for a while.
I think it was quite brave of Vince actually to leave at that time, really.
Yeah.
Because he could have just hung in there and, like, when he just didn't want to, and we could have, like, consequently we could have some quite bad material there, like, he didn't have his heart in the group, so it was probably a brave thing to do.
Well, of course, he went on to great heights, his finest achievement being the signature tune of this series. Since you had written part or whole of the Depeche Mode catalog when you left them, were you afraid for their fate, or were you confident they'd be all right?
I was quite confident. I mean, I knew, because Martin wrote a couple of tracks on the album, and I mean, I think he's a great songwriter. And I think it was kind of good for both of us, really, because it gave us both a chance to kind of break out and do different things.
Martin's song, See You, makes the top 10, so you're still up there, at which point Alan begins to come into the picture. Had you been watching these guys from afar, or did they come to you?
They advertised in a Melody Maker when Vince left, and I answered the advert. That was all really. I knew of the singles, New Life and Just Can't Get Enough, but that's all I knew about the group.
Liar.
It's true.
Why do you say he's a liar?
No, he's probably... No. He did actually when he came along, because everyone else, it was funny because the auditioning that we was doing, a lot of the people that were coming along, they were fans, you know, and they were sort of so eager to come in, and a lot of them couldn't play that well or anything, and then Al come along, and he said, well, no, I've never really heard any of your stuff, you know, and so I suppose that sort of gives us the first idea that maybe that Alan was the right person.